Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Today we're going to talk about the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, Brahma Chaitanya, and even Brahma Kiranjivi, which is more immortality. We'll talk about all that. And I also want to get into the Upanishads a little bit. How are you doing, Scotty?
We're doing good.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
It's been warm.
Oh, yeah. It's been beautiful here because it cooled off at high 75. We had some hot days for a while. High 75 here, and then low's been, I think, in the high 50s up in the mountains here. It's been beautiful, kind of fallish like.
Yeah, we actually got a little rain yesterday.
A rare thing in your neck of the woods.
Rare thing, yeah.
LA, yeah. All right. Well, anyway, we'll talk a little bit about, what the Upanishads and what the Brahma Sutras actually are, okay? The Upanishads, they're actually within the Veda, within Apurusheya, which is, unmanifest. But what they are is kind of, we could almost describe it as a invitation or a welcoming and of course these things can be seen on different levels and from different angles, but it could be viewed as a welcoming and an invitation into the transcendent, into that which lies beyond relativity. So the welcoming is from the absolute, inviting us from the relative. Now in the relative means just that, relative. There's duality. It's the whole world, the universe of things and thingnesses, And so those different things can be divided into a number of different categories. And just on a surface level of life, you could say there's music, there's engineering, there's art, there's science, there's physics. And these are all different pieces of the puzzle of life. And in the state of enlightenment, or actually even in the structure of existence, all that comes from the same one root, the unified field, the absolute. And so what the Upanishads do, because there's so many pieces of the puzzle of life, our lives become like fragmented. And so the purpose of the Upanishads, then, you could say, is to help us within our own awareness bring all those pieces back together so we don't get lost in the, amazing maze of relativity, and reawaken to that one thing that is the source of who it is and what it is we truly are, and the source of all things, the source of the whole universe. What in modern physics they call the unified field. So now the Upanishads can be read in different ways. They can just be read as beautiful, stories, if you will, and it flows. It's beautiful. You can read the English translation if you'd like, and it's beautiful. They can be studied. They can be analyzed.
Michael, can they be used in our everyday life? Because
they can also
yeah.
They can also be used as a technique just by listening to the Vedic recitations, because those are sounds, those are impulses that come right out of the absolute that enliven that deep level of our being that brings all the pieces together. So, can you use it from a practical level, on a practical level in daily life and daily use? I don't really even think about it that way.
Yeah.
Uh, they could, in fact, there are even places where they will pick a branch of studies and interpret that branches, like, for example, mathematics, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then it gets down and you can get deeper and deeper and deeper insights into mathematics. And what is mathematics ultimately then is a play of what? That one thing that is consciousness. And I've talked about this before, consciousness becomes conscious of itself, perceives itself as other, and duality is born. Now you got two things, consciousness becomes aware of those two things, three things, cascades out into infinity and has a very mathematically precise structure. And so that's just one field. But all the different fields of knowledge have their foundational understandings like that. And what it does, you see, that creates insight. And so oftentimes when we look, Scotty, for a practical application, we try to stay on the surface and work with it on that level. But to me, and I think most certainly the Upanishads, all Vedic literature for that matter, what they do is they enliven that place of deep inner insight, which is the foundation of all knowledge, is pure knowledge. It's knowledge that isn't about memorizing facts so much as it's about awakening that deeper level of your being to a place of insight, rationality, reason, uh, uh, refinement of thoughts and emotions. And so from that place, everything in our life becomes more harmonious, more coherence. So that's like the foundation of pragmatics in life, practicality in life. It's what makes us people of reason and common sense. What is common sense? Common sense is just that. It's sensing into that level of existence that is common to all aspects of life and foundational to all aspects of life. And when we function from that place, we just have common sense. And common sense applies to anything you do.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I was thinking, because sometimes even just like playing golf, not to demean, the Upanishads or whatever to golf, but it was just, I use the principle, or try to use the principles, or, as much as wherever level that I'm at, it is. But even like putting, to judge distance, I'll do things like, I came up with a thing that I thought, okay, let me swing one that's too hard, just a practice swing that I know is for sure is too hard. And then I'll swing one that I know for sure is too soft. And then it kind of gives me a gauge of where how hard I have to hit it, to get it to the hole.
Yeah, and you see,
And
what way we could look at that is what you're doing. You're exploring different aspects of the physicality with respect to golf, uh, to help you access through that exploration. You see, you start to access the inner intelligence, the intelligence that's there inherent in the foundation of existence, pure intelligence, and you're facilitating the accessing and the welling up of that intelligence through the physical body.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
athletes do.
yeah,
It's
and
coordination, harmonization.
yeah, it's like being in the zone or whatever, because like
Mm.
when you were really doing it, you're not really thinking, you're just feeling, you know, those things, and it automatically goes once you're in that zone, kind of, you're in that place deep inside of you, kind of.
Yeah, and even in the field of music, what makes music beautiful? It's that it's reconnecting us with that place of that inner harmony, inner divinity, if you will, that we all sense inside, but it really good music actually enlivens that. And so all of that you could see, in a sense, is you could say it's Upanishadic, if I can use the phrase. It's the Upanishads then is something that when we listen to, when we chant, when we work with, helps us then to reunite with that foundation of life.
Yeah. So all this stuff can apply to basically anything that we do. I mean, we're having a conversation, we're looking at something, whatever it is. Yeah.
That's
it seems
right.
like
It's the fountain of common sense. It's the fountain of wisdom. What is wisdom? Refined common sense, really. A more refined common sense. Yeah. But now there's a aspect. There's one. The Upanishads is broken up different Upanishads, and in the Kata Upanishads, Chandas asks Yama, Yama is the Lord of death. And so he asks him about, he asks him a couple different things, but then finally the third boon he was granted by Yama was to ask about what happens, after a person drops the body. What are the possibilities? And at first, Yama doesn't want to answer the question. He says, "Ask me anything else. What do you want? I'll give you anything as a boon, but don't ask that, And the reason is because it's, first of all, what happens varies so much based on a person's state of awareness and level of consciousness when they drop the physical body. But to really answer the question fully, Yama had to address the higher levels of consciousness, Brahman consciousness, and what happens when a person in Brahman consciousness drops the body, and even in the state of Kiranjivi, which is it's a refined state of Brahman consciousness. In a sense, when a person becomes enlightened, even if it's just the beginning, cosmic consciousness, just awakening to the idea that the depth of your being, what lies there is the absolute state of cosmic consciousness. You're aware of the cosmic, if you will, nature of your own life. We all sense it. We all feel it. And we can intellectualize about it. We can get emotional about it, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about an actual state of physiology where that level of our being is fully awake in our own awareness. It's always awake, but not in our own awareness because it's clouded by our identities, our limitations, our associations, what in Maharishi Patanjali referred to as the chit, the storehouse of impressions, the subconscious mind that's basically doing the driving. No matter what our conscious mind tells us, it's really the subconscious mind that sort of is, in a sense, in control. So I was talking about the Brahma Sutras, previous podcast. And I understand, Scotty, a lot of people had kind of a hard time with it. It was just like a little too far out there, a little too abstract. Yeah. But I think if we visit it and then revisit it and touch base with it from different angles, I think that's good. And it gives us, increasingly more insights into its nature.
Dyeing the cloth.
Yeah. So the idea then is, sometimes it's compared to, sometimes they talk about different levels of enlightenment. Sometimes they talk that there's only one enlightenment. It happens only once, cosmic consciousness, but that's like entering a cave that's dark and your eyes haven't adjusted yet. So all the higher levels of consciousness are really just kind of like the eyes adjusting so that you see more clearly. And what happens in Brahman consciousness is you get to a point where you see what is, and you actually literally see the pasha. Pasha means see, just see. You actually see what is. So again, you look at that pillow. That's the analogy I used last time. You look at a pillow example, and you see that pillow is the absolute. Everything is the absolute. Everything came into the absolute. It's everything. The essential nature is the absolute. And so when that becomes a living reality, not a theory, not an emotional state, not an attitude or philosophy, but that's what you see.
Michael, does it, again, going not to demean this at all, but just does it help in your everyday life? Does it, what are there advantages, disadvantages? What is it? I mean, what does it do to your everyday life?
When my older daughter was just a little kid, we went to visit her grandparents in Florida. And so my daughter and I were in the Gulf of Mexico swimming, on the beach, and a wave would come in, and I'd let the wave knock me over, and I'd look at her, I'd say, out of phase. And then the next wave would come in, and I'd let it bring me up and float me to the surface very gently. And I'd say, in phase. And every time a wave came in and then I let it knock me over and said, out of phase, she would laugh, She just thought it was the funniest thing. And so what this does, what human evolution does, is it enables us to live more in harmony with nature. As we evolve, we live more and more in harmony with nature, our true nature and Mother Nature. And I'm not talking about the nature of our conditioning and our programming and our limitations and our conditioning, but I'm talking about that which lies beyond that, Mother Nature herself, you see. And that's the practical application. Now, we could get into a discussion of karma. Maybe we'll get into that today, because all these things are so multifaceted. But the foundation is what we want to talk about here. And so in Brahman consciousness, you're living so deeply in harmony with the foundation of nature that it emerges all the way to the surface of life. What you see, what you hear, it's all the expression emerging untaintedly, if you will, from the depth of the absolute. And so then in Brahman consciousness, what happens is that expands. And like I was saying, it's not just the one object you perceive, but the whole environment. Like you're looking at the pillow, but the whole room is seen to be that. And then it expands out ultimately to the totality, everything. You put your attention outward to the edges of the universe, then boom, the Hiranyagarbha is there. In every case, the pillow is that, but you know yourself to be that. That happened in cosmic consciousness. So it's I am that, thou art that. All of this is nothing but that, you see? And that's a living reality. But as we said, the point is that, I think a lot of times people think, oh, okay, somebody gets enlightened, all of a sudden they got it all figured out and everything's hunky-dory and everything's wonderful. And it's really not like that, because it's overwhelming, and it takes getting used to. I mean, can you imagine the first time you open your eyes and look out and I am that tree or I am that pillow? It's not like, oh, isn't that great? No, it's like, oh my God, what's going on? So the Brahma Sutras then, they can be read and appreciated and listened to on any level, whatever your level, and it has a value. But on the deepest level, what it is it's some sutras, some threads, some little one-liners, if you will, that help a person who has entered that state and is having a hard time dealing with it and trying to sort it out in their own head. That's the Brahma Sutras. Does that make it a little clearer, Scotty, you think?
Yeah, I think so people can start to see how does it interact with you daily or whatever.
Yeah. But now there's a question about that comes up. I think a lot of people, this notion of immortality, and is immortality a possibility? Well, there are two kinds of immortality. There's an immortality that's physical immortality, and there are actually techniques described in the ancient Vedic literature, technique called Kaya Kalpa, which is a technique that, profoundly rejuvenates the body, and people can live for, astounding periods of time with physical body through Kaya Kalpa. There's also, the word immortality, in one sense, we are the absolute. The absolute never dies, it's eternal, so we never die, we're eternal. And there's a core of our being then in the very seed form of relativity, if you will, that does perpetuate and reincarnates and all like that. That was actually in the Bible at one time, but they took it out, I think King James Version or something. At any rate, we're talking about another form of immortality now. We're talking about a form of immortality. You see, in Brahman consciousness, what happens is, I am that, thou art that, all of this is nothing but that. It's all Brahman. All knowledge is contained in that pillow. The pillow, and what I see in the pillow is basically, I'm cognizing the Veda and the very nature of existence. Not as a recitation or anything, but just as that state of pure knowingness. And that, Scotty, kind of relates to what we were talking about before. How does that help in daily life? Well, even in the state of cosmic consciousness, or even as we become, it enables us to reason better. It enables us to have more insight. The understatement there, isn't it? But now in Brahman consciousness, that it's just more refined, deeper, fuller. Okay? But now in that state, particularly when you first enter it, and it's just so overwhelming, it's like, oh my God, what happened to me? It's just almost unbearable to try to even deal with it. And so the Brahma Sutras help, and it starts to make sense of it in that. But still, there's a place that when you look at anything, be it a pillow or a chair, a table, whatever, on its deepest level, it is one with divinity. I talked about it the other day. It's like he who has no name, pure consciousness, but conscious, no opinion, no bias, no slant to anything, just full awareness, an unbounded total witness. Ishvara. And that elicits, as you can imagine, a phenomenal degree of awe and humility. I am that, but I can't quite bring it fully in and embody it to the point where what? I'm walking around as he who has no name. Now, we're not talking about God here, by the way. God is something different. God is someone that lies beyond the capability of a human physiology to even embody. Okay, people that in history that were considered the incarnation of that, they're called avatars. That's a very different thing. Okay, we could get into the nature of an avatar at some point in the future if you'd like.
Does that go the same for like Jesus too, or because
Sure. I mean, whoever you consider to be an avatar, all avatars,
Yeah.
Yeah. But what we're talking about here, though, is that silent witness, all-knowing, you could say, but not See, even all-knowing can be misleading because in the human physiology, we're not capable of knowing everything simultaneously. Ours is a very different physiology. You could say God's physiology if you want. Omniscient, omnipresent, like that. But nevertheless, a witness of infinite insight. And so by virtue of that, there's an inclination to, keep that somewhat at a distance. It's like, even the pillow, it's like, it's just unimaginable how profound, that pillow is, And so what happens, though, over time is you get more and more comfortable with what it is you know yourself to be, really. You get more comfortable with it. It's a matter of just getting more comfortable with it to the point where then you actually get to the point where you do actually embody it. You live it. It's not a ego trip. Quite the opposite, really. And what happens then is even the ego, if you will, in that sense, it becomes huge, encompasses the whole universe, but it also becomes like a thin veil. And how it is perceived by others is really a function of their own conditioning, their own limitation, their own preconceived notions. For example, we have preconceived notions of what, Jesus was like. And I really believe that if you were to actually meet Jesus, it would be like, you know what, that's not really what he was like. It becomes these idealized notions that, if you really take a look at it, are not consistent with what we know about his history. But nevertheless, we walk around with these preconceived notions and we, judge other people's levels of awareness based on those preconceived notions. That's why they say that enlightened person, particularly in this age of Kali Yuga, enlightened people get kicked around like a football. They're not really appreciated for who and what it is they are because they're not living up to some bogus ideal, some false ideal. But when a person is living that level, when they fully embody that level, then when the physical body drops, that thin veil, if you will, of their identity, of their sense of who they are, that thing that we're all afraid we will lose when we drop the body, it endures. It's called Chiranjeevi, the immortals. The 7 Saptarishis are that level. And it's humanly attainable. That level is humanly attainable. Almost unfathomable that it could be, but it is, And so by reading the Upanishads, that facilitates, that helps us to enter, first of all, that deeper level of existence, which is the transcendent. And in a sense, you could say that's when the journey really begins. People might think it's the end, but no, it's not. That initial awakening is the beginning of a long journey through cosmic consciousness, refined cosmic consciousness, unity, Brahman, and beyond. And I hope that makes the whole thing a little more clear, Scotty. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Did you see there's an article in Scientific American, the current issue, that talks about how the Big Bang, the James Webb Telescope has refuted it. It can't be right.
Right.
All that's starting to become common knowledge. But remember, Scotty, we were saying that before the James Webb Telescope was even doing its thing. You remember?
Right. Yeah.
And we predicted that, and sure enough, we were right. Now, how? I can't remember how we. I can't even remember what it is that made it so clear to me that I can't remember. Anyway, it's interesting that all that is coming out. I saw a interesting quote. What's her name? Sylvia Plath. She said, "I like people too much or not at all." And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, you get that. I thought it was really interesting because, when you see the divinity in them, it's almost like you like them too much, and so you overlook their flaws, if you will. You overlook their identity that's coming from, the chit, their subconscious, conditioning, their programming, their limitations. You just overlook it, and you just see the divinity in them, and that's who you love. That's what you love. That's what you base your relationship on, and that's good as long as you're just not completely oblivious to the rest. On the other hand, sometimes you get into a relationship with a person where you ignore the divinity, and what you're really looking at is, oh, this person's got all these issues and all these problems, and they're such a terrible person. So you either like them too much or you don't like them enough. You either like them too much or you don't like them at all.
Is it almost like a product of what's happening now? It seems like everything is so polarized that it's throwing everybody to the extreme pole,
in both directions, isn't it?
Yeah,
because we have our little clique or our little friends or whatever, and we're the good guys and everybody else out there's a bad guy.
you're right.
You watch the news, and what do you say when you watch the news? Oh, the world's nuts. Never mind yourself, it's just the world.
Those guys, yeah.
Yeah, those guys, But so what happens, and it's not easy to do, and I'm not great at it, I have to admit, boy. But can you see the divinity in a person and at the same time not like turn a blind eye to the obvious issues that they may have? And can you navigate those waters in a way that enhances the relationship and doesn't compromise it? It's a little bit, I guess you could say it's a little bit like a gardener. A gardener, sees a little plant sprouting up and that, and they don't get mad and judgmental of the plant and maybe slap the plant a little bit or something because it's not doing what they wanted to do. What do? They nurture it. They support it. But they're aware that, oh, it needs water. Oh, there's this problem, or oh, there's that problem. But the predominant focus is on the health of the plant and the beauty of the plant, the divinity within the plant. And I've talked about Dr. Shen in Manhattan, who passed away some years ago, not decades ago, but dear friend. And he once told me, he says, I don't deal with disease, I deal with health. You bring out the health. And if you can cultivate that kind of relationship with everything and everyone, it's a big step forward. It's a big step forward. Not so easy to do. It's easy to get angry and upset and with people and really start focusing on, places where they might be a little stuck or limited. But the art of, having own awareness of that, but having the predominant thing be to try to facilitate the thing and heal the thing. Now, oftentimes in extreme cases, admittedly, the best way to deal with it is to just stay away from them. If you're talking about, I don't know, extreme cases, a serial killer or something, I don't know. But in our basic relationships, if you can do that, if you can work with that, not naively, not obliviously, but intelligently, you take a great, huge step forward in life, All right. Anything else, Scotty?
No, I don't think so.
It's funny, this other quote I got a kick out of: wisdom is what's left after we've, run out of personal opinions. Personal issues might perhaps be a better word. If we come clean, if we function from that place of inner divinity, but now I did say I'd talk about karma a little bit, and I'll do that now. Because, you see, even after a person becomes enlightened, even all the way to Brahman consciousness and even beyond, the body can still have karma. And that karma comes back to the individual, and it can come back as conflicts, challenges, difficulties. I mean, look at the story of Christ as an example. A lot of the great saints, they really struggled. They really had challenges. Sometimes they say that, what's the difference between, what is that nature? What is the nature of that? And the idea is that they might have a crystalline awareness, crystal clear awareness, but the body itself is, still made out of mud. It has karma, So just some food for thought there. And see if there's anything else I wanted to touch base on. I think that's good enough for today, and we will talk with you again next week. Thanks so much for listening.